The Galactic Senate chamber buzzed with tension. Representatives from every major civilization filled the massive hall, their murmurs echoing off the polished stone walls. At the center stood the Supreme Chancellor, an aged being with centuries of wisdom etched into his features. His voice, steady and absolute, cut through the noise. By unanimous decision, humanity is hereby barred from all forms of interstellar warfare. Silence fell. No one dared to argue. Even the war-hardened representatives of the Drakari Dominion, known for their thirst for conquest, sat motionless. The decision had been made. The universe would never allow humans to wage war again. From the far side of the chamber, the human ambassador remained impassive. He neither protested nor questioned the ruling. He simply nodded, as if this outcome had been expected all along. That, more than anything, unsettled the assembled species. Whispers broke out. Some in the chamber understood why this ruling had been made. Others, particularly those who had not witnessed the event firsthand, struggled to grasp how one battle, just one, could have changed everything. A delegate from the Klaxi Confederacy finally spoke, her voice laced with disbelief. How did it come to this? The Drakari have fought 1,000 wars. What made this battle different? All eyes turned to the Supreme Chancellor. He sighed heavily. It was a burden to know the truth, but the universe had to understand. Because in a single battle, humanity proved what they truly are, he said. Not just warriors, not just strategists. They are something else entirely. Something war itself was never prepared for. The chamber waited. The tension in the room deepened as the Chancellor prepared to recount the events that had led to this unprecedented decision. For centuries, war among the stars had followed an unspoken code. Battles were fought with honor, with predictable tactics, with rules that civilizations adhered to for millennia. Victory belonged to the strong, the experienced, the technologically advanced. The great empires of the galaxy had waged wars for eons, but these conflicts were never chaotic, never unpredictable. Each species had developed its own doctrine of battle. Strategies refined over generations, locked into place like mathematical equations. And then humans arrived. They were newcomers to the galactic stage, a minor species from a backwater planet. When they first made contact, they were seen as nothing more than another fledgling civilization, unremarkable and unthreatening. Their entry into interstellar politics was met with mild curiosity at best. At first, they focused on trade, on diplomacy, on industry. They learned quickly, far faster than expected. But what no one had realized was that humans had been studying something else as well, something the galactic community had long since perfected and forgotten how to fear: warfare. Not the slow, ceremonial battles of the elder species, not the calculated, predictable engagements that followed traditions older than some stars. Humans saw war differently. They had been fighting for their entire existence, not in mere conflict of territory, but in brutal, unrelenting struggles for survival. Their history was a tapestry of blood and fire, of nations rising and falling in the span of centuries, of tactics evolving not over millennia, but within single lifetimes. The galaxy had dismissed them. It had underestimated them. The first warning came when human colonies began expanding. Unlike other species, they did not seek permission. They did not hesitate. They pushed forward, settling planets others had overlooked, thriving in conditions others considered inhospitable. The Senate watched with amusement until the Drakari took notice. The Drakari Dominion, an empire built on conquest, saw humanity's rapid expansion as an insult. A species so young had no right to claim so much territory. And so, the Drakari issued a demand: surrender the colony of Vega 5 or face annihilation. The response from humanity was simple. No, it was not arrogance. It was not defiance. It was a statement of fact. A declaration that they would not be pushed. The Drakari laughed. A fleet was assembled. 300 warships, each forged from centuries of battle experience. Against them stood a human fleet of 50. The battle was expected to last minutes. The result was never in question, or so they thought. The Senate members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Even now, long after the battle had ended, the weight of what had transpired still lingered. What followed was not a battle. It was not even a war in the way the galaxy understood it. It was something else entirely. The Drakari fleet engaged first, following tactics that had crushed hundreds of enemies before. Their ships moved in tight formations, their weapons firing in coordinated strikes designed to overwhelm enemy defenses. It was efficient. It was proven. It was unstoppable. And then the humans did something no one expected. They moved in ways that made no sense. Their ships scattered, breaking formation in an instant. The Drakari commanders assumed it was a sign of panic, until the first wave of their own ships exploded. It was chaos. Human pilots did not fight with the rigid discipline of the galactic empires. They fought like predators. They adapted. Their ships weaved between enemy lines, striking in unpredictable patterns. The Drakari formations collapsed as human vessels darted through their ranks, hitting weaknesses they didn't even know they had. It should not have been possible. A species so new to space warfare should not have been capable of countering strategies that had been refined for thousands of years. And yet they did. And that was only the beginning. The chamber fell into silence again. Some of the newer representatives, those who had only heard fragmented reports of the battle, paled as realization dawned upon them. The Supreme Chancellor's voice was quiet now, but every word carried weight. "This is why we made our decision," he said. "Because in one battle, humanity proved what they are capable of, and we could not afford to let them prove it again." The human ambassador remained silent, his expression unreadable. He did not argue. He did not protest, because he knew what they had done. And more than that, he knew what they had not yet shown. The galactic community had been given a single glimpse of what humanity could unleash, and that was enough. Forever. The Drakari had never lost a war. Their empire was built on conquest, their military doctrine honed over thousands of battles. They had fought countless species, each falling predictably, some crumbling under direct assault, others surrendering after prolonged sieges. The outcome was always the same. The Drakari fought. The Drakari won. Vega. Phi was supposed to be no different. The colony itself was insignificant in their eyes, a resource-rich planet on the fringes of known space. Humanity had only settled it a few decades prior. They had no legacy, no real claim to it. The Drakari had assumed that when their fleet arrived, the humans would either flee or submit. That was how things worked. That was how things had always worked. Instead, the humans said no. The response was so direct, so absolute, that the Drakari warlords found it amusing. There had been no threats, no counteroffers, no desperate pleas for negotiation. Just one simple word. No. The Drakari had prepared for resistance, but not like this. Their war fleet, 300 strong, was among the most advanced in the galaxy. Each ship was a product of centuries of war, armed with weapons that had crushed empires. The humans had 50 ships. 50. Not only was it laughable, it was insulting. The orders were clear. Wipe them out. The battle began exactly as the Drakari expected. Their capital ships formed an unbreakable wall, moving in perfect coordination. The front line advanced, ready to erase the human fleet with single overwhelming strike. And then something strange happened. The humans did not meet them in formation. They did not hold the line like every other species before them. Instead, their ships scattered like startled prey. The Drakari commander scoffed. Panic, disorder. The enemy was breaking before the battle had even begun. But the Drakari were wrong. Humanity had not broken. They had begun. The first Drakari ships exploded in the opening moments, not from direct fire, but from their own mistakes. Human ships darted between their formations at impossible angles, forcing Drakari captains to overcorrect, collide, and expose their flanks. This was no panic. This was calculated chaos. Their ships moved with terrifying unpredictability, weaving between enemy lines, slipping through blind spots no battle-hardened species had ever thought to guard. Every time the Drakari adjusted, the humans adjusted faster. What had begun as an easy conquest was unraveling into something the Drakari could not understand. The Drakari warlords had believed in numbers, in superior firepower. But the humans fought like something else entirely. like they had studied every battle in history, and decided to break all the rules. Tactics that had worked for centuries failed instantly. Drakari commanders ordered ships to regroup. The humans shattered the regrouping lines before they could form. They ordered defensive formations. The humans exploited openings that should not have existed. They attempted to fall back and reset the engagement. The humans didn't let them. Panic spread through the Drakari fleet. Their war doctrines have been built on the assumption that battles followed patterns, that wars had structure. The humans were fighting like war itself was an evolving organism, one they had mastered. And then came the second horror. The Drakari expected a battle fought with weapons, with lasers, missiles, and railguns. But humans didn't just fight with technology. They fought with everything. The first sign was a radio silence. At first, Drakari commanders assumed it was simple jamming. But then false signals started appearing in their systems. Their own ships began receiving contradictory orders. Some were commanded to retreat. Others were sent charging forward into ambushes. No one knew what was real. Human electronic warfare had completely infiltrated their communications. Then came the psychological attacks. Drakari pilots began hearing whispers over their comms, static-filled voices in broken Drakari speech. Not threats, not taunts, just chilling statements delivered in an unsettling calm. You cannot win. We see you. Your strategy is flawed. At first, commanders dismissed it as human arrogance. But then, their own soldiers started hesitating. Crews abandoned their posts. Some ships powered down their weapons entirely. Their captains unwilling to fight an enemy they could no longer understand. The humans were not just breaking their fleet. They were breaking them. By the time the Drakari commanders recognized the full extent of the disaster, it was too late. Entire squadrons had been isolated and eliminated with brutal efficiency. Their flagship, the Bloodfang, a symbol of their empire's strength, was surrounded and destroyed in a matter of minutes. No species had ever done this to them before. And the worst part? The humans had done it without suffering a single loss. The remaining Drakari ships fled. Vega 5 was no longer a battlefield. It was a graveyard. The battle, if it could even be called that, had lasted less than an hour. The Drakari Dominion, an empire that had spent millennia perfecting the art war, had been utterly humiliated. For the first time in their history, they had been outmatched, not by superior numbers, not by advanced technology, but by sheer human ingenuity and ruthlessness, by something they had never encountered before. True adaptation. The survivors who escaped Vega 5 were not hailed as warriors. They were not welcomed as returning soldiers. They were seen as broken. And in the Galactic Senate, the shock waves of that battle were just beginning to spread. Humanity had revealed only a fraction of what they were capable of, and that was enough to terrify the galaxy. In the aftermath of Vega 5, the Galactic Senate was thrown into chaos. The battle had not just been a military defeat for the Drakari Dominion. It had been a revelation. For thousands of years, the galaxy had assumed that war was a solved equation. Every species fought differently, but the principles remained the same. Power determined the outcome. Numbers dictated victory. Experience shaped strategy. And then humanity arrived. The reports from Vega 5 spread like wildfire. Military analysts from across the known universe scrambled to make sense of what had happened. How had a fleet of 50 human ships annihilated a force 6 times its size without taking a single loss? How had an empire as feared as the Drakari been reduced to shattered remnants in less than an hour? The Senate demanded answers. At first, the Drakari leadership refused to acknowledge what had happened. They were a warrior race, built on pride and conquest. The idea that they had been so thoroughly outmatched was unthinkable. But the truth could not be denied. Every sensor log, every battle recording, every black box transmission told the same story. Humanity had not just won. They had rewritten the rules of war. The discussions that followed were unlike anything the Senate had ever seen. Normally, war was a political matter. Alliances, treaties, disputes over territory. But this was something else. This was survival. Because if humanity could do this to the Drakari, they could do it to anyone. The Senate chambers were packed beyond capacity. Representatives from every major civilization gathered to discuss one thing. What do we do about the humans? The proposal to ban humanity from warfare was met with immediate resistance. The Drakari, still humiliated, wanted revenge. "We must strike back," their warlord bellowed, his voice echoing through the hall. "We cannot allow them to stand unchallenged." A murmur of agreement spread through certain factions, those who saw humanity's victory as an affront to the established order. But others were more cautious. If the Drakari could not defeat them, what makes you believe another attempt will succeed? Asked a delegate from the Thousand Consortium. Their species had fought the Drakari to a bloody stalemate centuries ago. They knew war. They knew what it meant to be outmatched. The chamber fell silent, because deep down, everyone understood the unspoken truth. If humanity had chosen to, they could have pursued the retreating Drakari fleet. They could have pushed deeper into Dominion space. They could have continued their war. But they hadn't. They had won. And then they had stopped. It was that restraint that terrified the Senate more than anything else. An empire that revels in war will fight endlessly. A species that masters war and chooses not to use it? That was something else entirely. What do they want? Another senator asked. It was a fundamental question. Humanity had proven their capability, but they had made no demands, seized no territory beyond Vega 5, and sent no ultimatums. The human ambassador, a calm and composed figure, had simply attended the meeting without expression. He did not gloat. He did not threaten. He merely waited. And that was what unsettled them most. The debate raged for days. Some called for immediate diplomatic negotiations. Others whispered of preemptive strikes, of containment policies, of anything that might prevent humanity from becoming a dominant force. And then came the final revelation. A group of strategists, deep in their research, had been analyzing humanity's military history, not just their space battles, but their wars on Earth. They compiled a report, and when they presented their findings to the Senate, it sent a chill through every being present. The Battle of Vega 5, as horrifying as it was, had been nothing compared to what humans had done to each other. In their short history, humanity had waged wars that made the worst interstellar conflicts look like border skirmishes. They had destroyed entire cities in moments. They had waged wars not for conquest, but for ideas. Their strategies had never stopped evolving. Their conflicts had driven them to refine their methods of destruction to an art form. And worst of all, they had fought wars just as brutal as Vega 5 before they even left their own planet. The galaxy had always viewed war as something external, something that happened between species, between empires. But humans had made war an internal force. They had fought themselves harder, bloodier, and more ruthlessly than any species in history. The realization was staggering. The battle against the Drakari had been easy for them. The decision became clear. The Senate had one chance to contain this threat before it was too late. They could not afford to let humanity refine its tactics any further. A formal decree was drafted, a vote was cast, and by unanimous decision, humanity was banned from interstellar warfare. The ruling was absolute. No human nation, no human fleet, no human mercenary company would be allowed to participate in armed conflict of any kind. If they did, the entire Galactic Senate would unite against them. It was an unprecedented act, one driven not by hatred or politics, but by sheer, unrelenting fear. When the ruling was announced, the human ambassador simply nodded, not in protest, not in acceptance, as if he had known this was inevitable. And as the session ended, as the Senate congratulated itself on preventing the rise of an unstoppable war machine, a quiet unease settled over those who truly understood what had happened, because humanity had been given an excuse to stop fighting. And that was the only reason the galaxy still existed. The ban on human warfare was meant to be a victory for the Galactic Senate, a final safeguard against an unpredictable, uncontrollable force. No one would have to face humanity's terrifying military prowess again. No empire would suffer the fate of the Drakari. No species would risk extinction at the hands of an opponent that fought like war was woven into their very nature. At least, that was the intent. For a time, the decision brought a fragile sense of relief. Trade continued. Diplomacy resumed. Humanity, rather than resisting the ban, adapted to it in ways the Senate had not anticipated. Instead of being seen as an exile from war, the ruling became a convenience, an enforced neutrality that freed humanity from the burden of endless conflicts plaguing the stars. But then, the consequences began to unfold. The first sign of trouble was the power vacuum left in humanity's absence. The galaxy was not a peaceful place. Wars had always been a part of interstellar politics, fought between factions vying for dominance. The Drakari, despite their humiliating defeat, were still a major power, and other species had long suffered under their reign. With humanity barred from conflict, some factions saw an opportunity. Smaller nations, ones that had previously relied on human military alliances, suddenly found themselves vulnerable. Pirates and warlords, once kept in check by the silent threat of human intervention, grew bolder. The balance of power shifted in ways the Senate had not foreseen. And then there were the mercenaries. For centuries, wars in the galaxy had often been fought by hired guns, neutral forces that offered their services to the highest bidder. Humanity had been expected to fade from that industry. After all, what use were soldiers who could no longer fight? But humans did not leave the battlefield. They adapted. Instead of fighting, they trained. Instead of leading armies, they advised them. Instead of waging war, they engineered it from shadows. The first rumors came from the outer systems. Fleets that had never known discipline suddenly moved with a precision they had never displayed before. Armies that had spent decades struggling against occupation began winning battles against superior forces. Guerrilla fighters, once disorganized and desperate, turned into coordinated units capable of outmaneuvering entire militaries. And in every case, when prisoners were taken and interrogated, a single, unsettling truth emerged. They had been trained by humans. Humanity had taken war, something that had always been a brutal, bloody necessity, and turned it into something else entirely, a science, a skill, a trade that could be taught. Their strategists did not fight, but they sold battle plans. Their tacticians did not command, but they molded leaders who would. Their engineers did not build weapons for themselves, but they designed machines that shifted the tides of war for others. They had not been exiled from warfare. They had become warfare. The Senate quickly realized the mistake they had made. By banning humanity from direct conflict, they had only removed the visible threat. The real danger, their knowledge, their expertise, their ability to adapt, had spread like wildfire. Panic began to take hold. The Drakari, already weakened, found themselves losing ground not to humanity, but to those trained by humanity. Rebellions erupted across their territories, led by warriors who had never fought before, but now moved like seasoned veterans. Entire wars were being won by civilizations that, only years ago, had been considered insignificant. The Senate called for emergency meetings. Humanity had found a loophole in their ruling, and it had to be closed. But then came the final, undeniable realization. It was already too late. Humanity had done something no other species had ever attempted. They had taken war and outsourced it. Even if the Senate outlawed human training, even if they banned human advisors, even if they tried to silence the flow of human military knowledge, it wouldn't matter, because the galaxy had already learned. And once knowledge spreads, it cannot be contained. The true horror was not that humanity had broken the rules. It was that they had never needed to. By banning humanity from war, the Senate had only ensured one thing. Humanity would never need to fight again, because now everyone fought like them. The realization settled over the Senate chamber like a death sentence. For the first time in galactic history, the monopoly on war had shifted, not to a species, not to an empire, but to an idea crafted by humans, an idea that would never die. And in the farthest corners of the galaxy, as new battles ignited and old wars were decided by strategies no non-human could have conceived just a decade prior, one simple truth remained unspoken. The greatest weapon humanity had ever created was not a ship, not a fleet, not a weapon of mass destruction. It was war itself. And the galaxy had only just begun to understand what that truly meant.